Live from the Plutopia News Network, this is the Plutopia Happy Hour. Our guests tonight are Ruth Glendinning and Kent Dahlgren. The not ready for cable news players are here: John Lebkowski, Scoop Sweeney, Susie Sheeler, and our designated driver for the evening, Maggie Duvall.
Hello. Yes, hello from Taos. Welcome, Ruth and Kent. It's nice to have you on the show this evening. I know we've wanted to have Ruth for a while, and now we've got this wonderful amalgamation of the two of you that seems to be happening. You're those kind of people that it's hard to put a container around. What am I? What do I do? Which is good because you're multidimensional, and that's what we need for this new world. But we'll just start out with, I just was interested in a little bit about you each, but let's go at it from the point of what drew you together. You told me in a pre-interview, Ruth, that you're both word nerds, right? So tell us a story about how these two paths crossed, and we'll go from there.
Well, just over a year ago, a mutual friend on Facebook posted saying, "Why don't you two know each other?" And we went, "We don't know." And we immediately had a conversation, and it was like we had picked up where we had left off in another lifetime. It's just one of those things.
It was more like she'd been reading my notebooks. Actually, while I was on the phone with her, I was texting Trudy, who's actually behind Ruth, and I was like, "Who is this person? She's using my words. It's really unnerving." So
it's like we'd both been working the same field from different directions, and he'd been in the skateboard world and doing a lot of community activism and getting a lot of things done in the Portland area. And I'd been in Austin for at least as long, not skateboarding, but still being very active in other ways. And as we talked, and as we talked, it just became so clear that this was a moment where it was like Reese's peanut butter cups, it was like the chocolate and the peanut butter, it just worked. And from that, about 10 days later, we got thrown into the COVID crucible. Mm-hmm. And it was like, great, well, here's all we can do. All we can do is walk and talk about ideas and really, form all this together, have it really bake in. Mm-hmm. And that's it just went on and got deeper into the fact that we had both had these visions of a world that was inclusive, accessible, and engaging, where people actually, followed their passion in a very disciplined way to create opportunities for everybody. And it was pretty amazing. I know, go figure, right? How crazy is that? And it fed on, for me, it was, I've had literally 2.5 decades of preparing for this. So as I know everyone on this call is, it's like we've all been called idealist, but the big joke is that we've been the realist all along. It's like, welcome to the reality that we've been seeing for decades. Mm-hmm. And here are some tools. So, Kent? Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to start. The thing about having lived a long time is that you don't know where to begin the story, and it could end up taking a very long time. Because I had actually got involved in political advocacy as a teenager, doing skateboard advocacy. And I learned an early lesson about how you don't really have any value to the power system unless you have votes and money. And as a teenage skateboarder, you just you're a nobody, right? Yeah. And it really didn't matter how eloquent I was able to represent our cause. In fact, I found the people to be savage, our own neighbors. I would go and speak at community meetings, and it was a really awful experience, actually, to realize just how savagely opposed the neighbors were. What they wanted, what they would prefer to have, is the land to be not used at all, than to actually have it used by people who are out in traffic riding a skateboard, right? And so that was interesting. I had the good fortune of being approached by people who had cut their teeth during the civil rights era. Again, this is in the mid 80s. And they took me under their wing, and they taught me a lot of stuff. They had me read a lot of the, from their worldview, the founding fathers might have been people of privilege, but then, a couple centuries later, people of color, people without privilege, tried to realize the American dream, and they were mostly killed for it. So, as a teenager, I would say I was radicalized through education by people who had spent, their youth learning from the institution. So I, as a as a kid, who aspired to be a pro skateboarder someday, I was also reading, George Jackson and Angela Davis and stuff like that. So
Wow.
it actually informed my advocacy efforts. And so I was in the military. I got into private industry. I worked in manufacturing, I worked at Xerox, stuff like that. And meanwhile, all along, I was also doing advocacy, just getting better and better at my craft. And so, I could talk a long time about that, but, along the way, the skateboard thing is interesting because you're not really advocating for skateboarding. What you're actually doing is it's a code switch opportunity. You receive the interest that people have to do skateboard advocacy, but what you put back out is a multi-use recreational amenity. It's actually a multi-use thing, right? And as it turns out, that's as bizarre as that is, that turns out to be a wildly contentious perspective. Is that, you'd think that you'd want to bring in all those underrepresented members of society, and then what you make available to them through public space is a place that they can equitably share. And it turns out that's not a shared point of view. In fact, I'd say 15 years ago, I was in a documentary that was called Freedom of Space, and it talked about the use of public space by skateboarders, but it actually created a framing for how our society is biased towards those who can afford to be there. Basically, good customers is what they want. And it's what I would call euphemistically referred to as economic apartheid. So what we have are policies, public and private, which create not only policy, land use and policy decisions, but also policing decisions that bias towards good and loyal customers to the detriment of those that aren't. And when you combine those with law enforcement, it starts to look like fascism, although we can't technically say fascism anymore because people stop listening, right? They say, oh, great, yeah, everybody's a fascist. Okay, then I'll say economic apartheid. And I would say that we're on the losing end of that. So anyway, I've been really interested in equity, social equity, for all, including those that we call houseless, because, I'm a veteran and those are my people. So, it was great meeting Ruth because I'd been obsessed with this idea that language might unlock these pockets of opportunity. And then I was on the phone with this person. It looked like she'd been reading my notebooks, and it was frankly a little bit creepy at first. I mean, I was literally texting Trudy. I was like, who is this person who's reading my mail, right? Turns out it's not that at all. It was that.
Yeah.
It took me a while to be persuaded of that, for what it's worth.
I showed her my own notebooks. I'm like, see?
Oh, I also do bizarre renderings, but these are different than my renderings.
Well, that just speaks to what you said again, Ruth. The most powerful technology is language.
Yes.
And I'm really fascinated about just what you're saying, Kent, too, about you're flipping the story around. You're just getting out of that narrow container where we just heard the same thing over and over again. So you don't have that distance and perspective to ask the questions, right? You're like frame it in a different way. So tell us about that more.
Well, and part of that is, a lot of this has come to me in downloads. It's like I just, and y'all have all seen my notebooks, and I scribble just whatever's there, and then it eventually comes together. Not mine. So, but the whole idea is, I think about potentials and containers, that we have this unlimited potential, and language is this most amazing container that we bring to that potential together so people can engage with it, and we can start testing out some stories. Well, what we've been talking about, and this is a big thing in Austin and pretty much everywhere, as an example, is saying affordability versus ability to afford. Those on the surface might sound similar, but which one do you have control over? You don't have any impact on affordability, but you can have the tools to have the ability to afford. So it's just about flipping the script. And so when we start thinking about the story of predatory capitalism and why we are entrained to be consumers, as Kent was saying earlier, is that it's like consume or be consumed. It's like really we're all just, and I saw the wall a million years ago when I was in high school, and it was just, oh, that's it. That's us just being, escalated right up into the machine. And you thought, wow, there's got to be a different way. And I've had a lot of great opportunity to be at different edges of society. And one of those areas was my late husband, Keith Hogan, who was in a wheelchair. And, I learned so much about the power of inclusion, and the purpose of technology was for him, it helped him engage with the world in a different way. It kind of evened the playing field so he could have access. And so when you start looking through that lens, you know, and we would joke that some people just have their wheelchairs on the inside, you know, they were self-limiting, because if you limit your potential for success, then you can revel in your failure, you know, and you have that's a big party. That's a fun party. Everyone's sitting around talking about how they failed. And you're like, oh gosh, me too, you know, and they just sit and worry it into reality.
Oh,
So
you think that's bad? Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
exactly. It's like, oh, you only lost 2 toes. Well, let me tell you, you're like, okay, none of us should lose toes. Let's start with a new premise.
Like, yeah, my daughter and I talk about, you know, trauma and failure are not a competition.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like a bizarre fetish in our culture.
Yes.
You mentioned predatory capitalism.
Yes.
I saw a perfect thing in the news this evening, that may qualify. I used to collect baseball cards when I was a kid. I liked
Me too.
them, and they were cheap. They were just a fun little thing. And they were saying on the news that you can't find baseball cards anymore because they're being purchased like crazy, and the prices have gone up. And one of the big reasons is hedge funds are buying up baseball cards to hedge their fund. And that just I listened to that and I couldn't process it. It's like they're buying baseball cards, but you know, these are the people that put us into the capitalistic toilet, so to speak, with their practices, and now they're even picking on the kids who like baseball cards.
Well,
those baseball cards are non-fungible tokens there.
See, there you go. And I just wrote a big article about NFTs.
Well, and in fact,
I was like,
and in fact, we implemented, because I have a software company, we implemented NFTs a couple of years ago, but it was for a totally different purpose. It's that you can hold a deed or a title as collateral within a multi-signature account within a closed economy. It didn't occur to me that you could use it for this thing, but you know, maybe my looker's a little bit poorly calibrated. I was like, well, I think the title and deed as collateral for local currency is more exciting, but you know, whatever. Right?
well, and, you know, and the thing is, Scoop, is that hedge funds should be buying baseball teams. They should leave the cards for us.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I can't afford tickets or a team. Can I have a card, please, sir? You know, it's like very Oliver. And
well, there was something, you know, Trudy's sewing, her daughter does theater, which I find to be endlessly delightful. So she comes over and she shares like basically a complete inventory of what all the different costumes have to be, which then I was able to glean that I think it's from Beauty and the Beast, having never actually seen it, but I was able to figure this out. So Trudy is joyously over there sewing, and she's got this 50-year-old sewing machine. And we were talking about how this is one of the terrible things you learn working at a place like Xerox, is that it takes 3 years to build a copier, not because it takes 3 years, but because you're spending that time finding gears that only last 18 months, which is true, by the way. And it's because people won't, isn't that awful? It's like really true. And the thing is that, you know, because you know that people aren't going to pay a warranty longer than 18 months, it's not in your financial best interest to do so. But that's not exactly true. In fact, it's actually false. You make money on the use of the product because you're making money in ink and toner. So it's actually a false economy. It's just a great example of it, I mean, honestly, the snake eating the tail in this one, right? What we did is we had implemented a practice that says that people need to expire the machine when they no longer pay the warranty. But what you end up doing is creating an opportunity for them to just buy a competitive product. It ends up being like, I've never seen a company try so hard to go out of business, honestly. It's like, I mean, I worked with a lot of really smart people there, but it was like the dumbest business practices that were in microcosm what we have within our broader economy. It's like it made sense within a certain set of key performance indicators within a certain silo. And it's what Ruth always talks about: privatizing the profits, socializing the cost. That's a great example. And it was within a for-profit company, right? So that's my rant topic, by the way.
Well, we're talking about economy and planned obsolescence and all that, and we're also talking about Trudy in the background there. I want to tie it into tell us about. Hi, Trudy. I want to tie it into tell us about your mutual passion that's led to this, what you're calling the Anti-Fragile Playbook. Tell us first. Tell us about what is Anti-Fragile and what is the Anti-Fragile Playbook.
Well,
Go Ruth, raise the Ruth. All right.
So we were eating Chinese food by the UT campus last August. We dared to step out of our bubble. It was super exciting, you know. And all of a sudden it was like, man, we should do an Anti-Fragile Playbook. And because Kent had already done the skate park guide,
Mhm.
so
I did.
he already
Actually,
had
did a book
playbook
like
as-
20 years ago. I
yeah,
could talk
and-
about it.
Okay.
So, and he's like, so let's talk about anti-fragile. I said, well, it's beyond resilience. Resilience is like you can withstand it. It's like in the example as I use, having grown up in Houston, it is still flooding in the places when I was that as it did when I was a kid in Houston. Plus, it's sinking, so it's like actually way worse.
Swamp
there's
Castle.
yeah, and there's our the book, of course, you know. And the beauty of anti-fragile is it actually gets stronger in the places it breaks. It's looking at the system and saying, oh, that's going to be a stress point. So you design it so it actually improves if it breaks. And it does break, by the way. Everything does. And it's been used in science and technology, but nobody had ever really applied it to community and kind of thinking about human relationship. And so I started looking around and thinking about it and using Houston as the example, of course. But here we are in Austin, where everyone has had their toes in the creek here, is we started thinking about anti-fragile and going, okay, what does this really mean? And we started observing the way certain neighborhoods were coming together whenever they needed something because they knew they couldn't get it from an institution, or they didn't qualify, or they didn't have the time. That's the big thing, is time. You don't have time for the 3 to 6 to 9 months for you to qualify for something. You're like, you have to feed your kids tonight, you have to fix your car this week, you know, whatever it's going to be. So you naturally turn to the people closest to you and say, how do we make this happen?
Right.
And what they've done without giving it that name is they've created an anti-fragile system because they've tapped into the complexity of the invisible capitals. And we've identified those as these 5 keystone capitals, where just as you would in an ecosystem, once you have those keystone capitals in place, other elements just come into play. And so the first one is attention capital. You pay attention. The second one is, and I should have memorized this by now.
Relationships.
The second one is relationships. You invest in relationships. So you can apply financial terms to each of these. The third one is time. You spend time. The fourth one is trust, is that you build trust. And then the fifth one is wisdom. And they all have to be present. So whatever you pay attention to, and I think we've probably all heard the saying that where attention goes, energy flows.
Yeah.
That is some of that invisible capital. And so that's how an anti-fragile system, even though it's not called out as such, actually exists.
Yep.
You know, you see it in these ecosystems in nature.
Indeed. It's our supposition that there are expressions of soft capital that boast value which transcends hard capital. And a great example is wisdom, right? If I can tap into the wisdom, this is one of the benefits of having had such substantial influence by my grandparents, is that my feeling was if I could put into practice the things that they had learned, I might get a leg up on things. And the benefit is that I had a great relationship with my grandparents, who didn't treat me as a child. They encouraged me to try to step up. And so, you know, I like the way that we had, because we had written these 5 keystone capitals down, again, using the ecosystem as a metaphor. You know, there are certain species, like I love the squirrel one, by the way. I don't know if anybody's ever acknowledged the squirrel as a keystone species, but I mean, dude, the squirrel has no idea where he or she is bearing the nuts, right? They just bury him everywhere. It's like, man, it's talking about like it's it's all over the place. And then the cool thing about it is the squirrel doesn't realize that activity, which is probably pathological on the part of the squirrel, is what's feeding who knows how many other species of animals throughout the winter,
forests.
and literally building forests. So
Yeah.
you know, so it's like, you know, we attention capital. You know, I invested in attention. And from that, I'm investing time and or building a relationship, and I invest time, and that builds trust, and that unlocks wisdom. I like that. I like that construct a lot. There's something that we then talked about is once you've erected these as sort of the 5 keystones, how might you skip ahead? And it appears to be that if you act as a leap of faith, you can actually skip along that thing real quickly, right? It might be somebody in the community that has a disproportionate volume of wisdom and trust capital, probably an older member of the community. When I lived in Portland, I lived next door to a woman named Lena. She'd been in her house for 55 years. And man, once you got her to talk, you could not shut her up. But everything she said was valuable, right? But it's because nobody had talked to her. And she told me all kinds of things about which house had collapsed because the foundation had collapsed, you know? So if I had taken a leap of faith that this old woman knew what she was talking about, she delivered. You just couldn't get her to turn it off.
That's great.
Eleven.
And I bet she'd be somebody like if you said to her, "Oh my gosh, why didn't you why didn't you ever tell us?" And she would say, "Well, you never asked, right?"
No, it's true.
Yeah.
That's 100%
That's true.
every time.
And this is the thing where I've been playing with this idea that our society has, I would say, an addiction to high octane capital. Because
Oh my
that's the
God,
thing, is that we tell ourselves, because people say you guys are being like, that's great, but I mean, this is how we do things, and it's basically back to a dependency on high octane capital. I like that metaphor because I'm a car guy, and you run a car on high octane, that thing lasts about 30,000 miles if you're lucky, right? It just burns the engine up. So I think that works for me. I did want to talk about the anti-fragile thing just for a moment.
Yes.
I worked in manufacturing. I worked at a company called Tektronix, the people that do the oscilloscopes, and I worked at Xerox. And I have this thing, I like fixing broken things. And so, when you call tech support and they say, well, that's funny, that should be working this way. Well, of course, duh. Like if it was working as it was supposed to, you wouldn't have called tech support. So yeah. I'd be the one that would be responsible fixing the things that should have worked but didn't. Like, and I'm talking about the nuttiest, crummiest things, which made me the guy that they would rely upon for mergers and acquisitions, because a company doesn't go for sale unless it's broken, right? So, I became interested in what it takes to fix these things. And there's and Maggie, you're probably aware of the work of Henry Petrosky. He's actually an engineering professor, and he put out a book probably 25 years ago that's called To Engineer as Human. And it's his position is that you can teach engineering through the lens of failure, because it's all about that. It's all about how you actually address the potential for failure. And so I like that. And that really built on this idea of having, there's another author, actually a scientist named Radia Perlman. She talked about Byzantine robustness. I really love her work. By the way, she designed a communication protocol, and she left it on her boss's desk in the form of a poem. And it said, "I think I shall never see an algorithm as lovely as a tree, whose primary quality is loop-free connectivity," which to me is, which is brilliant. And at the end of it, it says, "I'm taking some time off. I'll see you in a couple of weeks," right? So the thing is, I love this stuff, right? I love this idea of going into robustness. So then this work by Nassim Nicholas Taleb is talking about anti-fragility. He takes it a step further. He says it's not sufficient to be robust. It's not sufficient to be resilient because it maintains current state. What might we learn from systems that benefit, that almost consume hardship? And one of the metaphors he uses, which resonates for me, is osteology. I fell a couple of stories as a kid. I broke both my feet, had casts in both legs, and by all rates, I shouldn't be able to walk normal. But as it turns out, my feet are super strong because the bones grew back stronger than before. So this is the thing. And when we talk about Keystone Capitals, what we're talking about in very practical terms is when the economy goes bad, anti-fragility kicks in. And if the system isn't factored to take advantage of those things, it's not going to succeed. So what's interesting is that when things go bad, people will turn high octane capital into soft capital. They literally do an exchange through acts of generosity. And and they've been doing it for millennia, right? We didn't invent this. So this is the thing we're talking about, is actually what Ruth says, was it plunging into the unremembered? What is it you say?
Immersing in the unremembered.
Yeah,
you're not leaping into the unknown, you're immersing in the unremembered. Because once we get into the right container, those tools are activated. They're already there.
Well, that's something it was really interesting being away from Austin and witnessing what was going on during the snowpocalypse, which y'all are gonna talk about, I know. But just seeing my burner friends, like, okay, there's nobody gonna come help us. So all the wisdom and skills and everything from everybody camping together and putting on this big event together forever, it all just gelled. And there was water, there was food, what do you need, what blah 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 blah, boom 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 boom, and and it was beautiful to witness.
Well, and they all had towels and they didn't panic, so they actually got it together. And it was really interesting because people who we're looking quite prescient when we're like, I know back in August when nobody was thinking, the coldest place was the HEB, frozen aisle. And everyone wasn't like, I suspect. It's like, no, it ain't gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, here we are, we're in Snowpocalypse 21. And I tell you, the theme for 2021 is hold my beer, because it's looking at 2020 like, really? Here we go, But what we saw over and over again was that people showed up and they stayed present and they made sure that things were taken care of to the best of their ability.
Right.
The city didn't have the capacity. The city, it's like it can't. It's like it can only get so close to the ground. Those big institutional things. So there has to be the tools on the ground, and nobody could plan for the ice and snow in the way it was delivered. Because it's like you've been here, Maggie. Day 1, you're like, yay. Day 2, 72. Okay, that pattern was completely broken.
Right.
But it was layers and layers of stuff. And so it gave people a chance to pull out those tools that they hadn't used. Feel productive.
I just want to mention that I never saw anything quite like what happened during the snowpocalypse, which was that everywhere I looked, I saw people offering to share and to help. And it was kind of an amazing thing, really. I mean, I didn't really expect that here in Austin or pretty much anywhere else.
And that's an example of immersing into the unremembered. I'm hoping I didn't interrupt you, Susie. But I'd say that muscle memory is there. If people plunge into it, they recognize that that's there. They have what it takes to pull this off.
And so they got a chance to feel what it felt like to have a purposeful life. And that is the thing that is going to do the most to keep people from backsliding into the old story. Because they're like, oh man, I feel like a better person.
Right.
And the other thing, like that point of opportunity, you're always talking about, creating the ground of being for opportunity. You put it differently, but I've already seen new jobs have emerged from this. All of a sudden, people created their own jobs. Suddenly, they have like a paid position that didn't exist before, just because of what they were doing to help. That was pretty amazing and fascinating to see. And again, everybody's saying like, I finally feel like I have something to do here. Like like purpose. Purpose is paramount. So anyway, and I didn't mean to break your flow, but I just
no, not at all. Well, and it was, so we recorded a podcast. We started October 24th. We've now published 22. So we've been a little productive, but we like to talk. I don't know if you noticed.
Verbose is the word I would use.
Perhaps you could tell us the name of the podcast and when we can catch it live.
It is the Anti-Fragile Playbook. And we always record it and then publish it. We're not quite as brave as y'all. We're not kind of going live yet.
I guess it hadn't occurred to me to do it live.
Yeah,
but
we guess we could. We kind of do. I mean, wow. Okay, well, we'll see you in a minute.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And it was interesting because people had said to me for years, and I think Kent's probably gotten a similar message. Wow, I just like to listen in on your conversations.
And you guys would love Clubhouse.
Yeah. No. Yeah. He's already.
I've been invited to I'm in these really fascinating conversations about intentional community on Clubhouse, and I just had one a couple of days ago, and it was such a great story. I don't want to take you off track.
Well,
it was.
Exactly, and I think that it's really good because we're using, so Clubhouse and as an app is just a tool to activate that potential, right? That it's like, so now we have this container called Clubhouse, and Clubhouse has these people on it, and you kind of shake it up and see what comes out of it. And I haven't been on it because I don't have an iPhone, but yet.
I think there's an Android version actually that's available on GitHub.
Oh, it is. The Android's available. Good to know.
I saw something about that the other day. One of the things that I really like about what you guys are saying is that I can make sense of it. And there's a bunch of people who are talking about sense making who aren't making any sense at all. The intellectual dark web. The people who are talking about Game B, who are, they're caught up in various like philosophical and ideological conceptions that to me are like fairly obtuse, but you're talking very directly about what we can do.
Oh no, and that's really it. There's one of my many theories. At one point I thought I should just have a podcast called My Big Toe is like my big theory of everything, because I have a theory on everything, but I didn't.
She does.
And so it's like there's cloud people and there's root people. There's cloud people that are up there just kind of being cloudy, And so those of us on the ground we're rooted in the doing of it. And the trouble with cloud people was they come to ground, they're fog. And so you're like, okay, you're really not helping. You know, you're not making it more clear.
Right.
So the root people, we can grow up into the clouds and benefit from that, but we know our place. And so we've all made this real serious commitment to make sure this is accessible and engaging for people. And part of that has emerged into a commitment to working at the household level. So just as Gandhi's village economics said that if the village fails, India fails, our premise is if the household fails, we all fail. And the dog agrees.
Yeah, so the dog is like, raise the roof.
And part of and another core part
That's
of
Joni
that
Mitchell.
is talking about this as kitchen table capitalism. Is saying, you know, the head of household, you know, and we use women's work, but that's not a gendered thing. It's just the work that is invisible and essential and undervalued in general. So imagine that the head of household is sitting at the kitchen table and they have these pantries of capital. They have their soft capital, they have their hard capital, they have their relationships, they have their food, whatever. How are they going to make their stone soup? How are they actually going to bring this together?
Yep.
So we're just super committed to making it as rooted and tangible as possible for people, and making sure that it's you know, one of the things we like to say is that it's for everyone, no exceptions, and
including
that means
those
no
that are
exceptions.
houseless.
Yes.
Including those that are houseless,
yes,
or have just been released from jail. We can't. I mean, what's not an anti-fragile system is one that continues to throw people away. We can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So one thing I would share to John's point is that I left the security because I went into the information security and the anti-fraud. This is my daughter, by the way. This is Juliet. I have lots of children because I'm a hoarder and I love kids.
That's right.
I really do. They keep my ego in check on the regular, which is like delightful. So I had been in the information security industry. I'd managed a lot of and designed a lot of pretty advanced technologies. And then I got into the anti-fraud industry. And then I left that in 2017, and I became the chief technology officer for a company called BitNation that aspired to build governance for stateless people. And they hadn't actually been able to pull off some of their designs because they were so up here, right? I mean, a good example on this, John, is that they needed to build a reputation system that rewarded people for social good. They had no idea how to pull it off. Part of it, by the way, is because they kept calling it an AI, which I was like, don't do that. Just call it an algorithm. Like literally, we're not talking about building whatever you're talking about. It's an algorithm. Literally. We're just talking about an algorithm. Right? I'm sure Maggie's over there just nodding like, yeah, we're not, I mean, just pretend for a moment we're not marketing and lying to each other. We're just going to make an algorithm,
just
okay?
a moment.
And the other part of it is that if we're just going to create an algorithm, why not use something from the domain of manufacturing, which has created an entire library of statistical process controls, which can quantify and qualify operations? I mean, why not, right? So that was the thing. And so it was a good opportunity to work with those people. And I got to work with, you know, Palestinian refugees, Syrian refugees, the Rohingya, I mean, literally actually hundreds of communities all around the world. And John, what was interesting is that what you become all of a sudden cheek to jowl with all these wonks, right? I thought, man, this is amazing. We're gonna off we go to the moon, right? And I went to Anarcho-Poco, which is an anarchy thing in Acapulco, and you learn like by degrees.
With anarchists, come on.
Oh man! And this is about the time I met Trudy. Actually, I met her in a theory of mind, or just a split off of a theory of mind group online. So we just really connected because Trudy is so rooted. She's such a normal person and also crazy smart. But don't let her know I know that. So the thing is that we started talking, and I'm trying to. And what's happening with this company is that they're becoming insolvent. Like their entire business case was around crypto, which just wasn't working out. So here I didn't want to have to lay off my engineers. I hate doing it, by the way. I love building teams, but I hate laying the people off. So I started brainstorming, how are we going to create a viable business case? And it seemed obvious to me, we'll just go to the ANCAPs, the ANCOMs, the you know, the libertarians, the intentional communities.
Oh my God, no.
And here's what you learn is that none of them want to do it. The seasteaders, oh my God.
Oh,
Like, I mean, the thing is,
Oh my
and no disrespect to them, but they don't realize that they're not, but they don't realize that they're just not going to do it, right? I mean, you know, like I can sit with ANCAPs and I can tell them I've created a system that allows a discrete community to deliver social services using private sector best practices in a way that doesn't violate the non-aggression principle, which is what they wanted. And to get even a single one of them to sign up for it is impossible, because guess what? They want to buy crypto at a profit. They want to, like, that's
a real
purpose. And this is the thing. I've been doing product design for a lot of years, and this is, and you know this, Maggie, because we have a similar background. There's this whole thing, like they can list all these things. There was a guy from Brazil, lawyer, was put a gated community. I flew him up to Canada, and he talked about how their community had all of this. He's a libertarian and the whole deal, you know, rah, rah, rah. And I was like, okay, I gave you everything that you want. I'll give it to you by December. And so I just want to know, like, in what manner will your community pay the $50,000 necessary to do it? And he's like, well, we wouldn't pay a penny for that. I'm like, well, why are we having this conversation, right? Because what you're telling me is there's no value, you see no value in it. And that's an interesting thing. There was no value. What he ultimately wanted to do, like a lot of these people, and I think, John, this is what you're talking about, they position the language of these different domains because it elevates their prestige within a community that's ultimately about some other type of exchange, right? They're probably exchanging ideas, they're doing something at a prestige level, or they're just buying crypto, who knows?
Well, and we talk about, I mean, they're very transactional.
Yes.
Right. So you have people that, you know, we have transformation and we have transaction. And what we're talking about is let's create that place in the middle where we're transacting transformation, that we're actually creating the right kind of containers so that there's growth and there's emergence and there's the irritants that make the pearl and all those things that you want to talk about. Because what is purely transactional is what we see now with predatory capitalism. Every single action has to lead to a dollar outcome or you get thrown away.
Right.
So what we saw during the snowpocalypse is that people realized, oh, we don't have access to our usual tools. We're going to emerge these other things. They have this outcome called, I feel like I have a purpose and I trust my neighbors. I want more of that. So it's inspired them to do something else.
Right.
And so, and I certainly have been, you know, patronizingly patted on the head and told me that I'm a good unicorn over here in the transformational pasture. But the truth is that I always knew that we just had to put the right tools around it, the right access to the right tools. And that's what we mean when we're talking about kitchen table capitalism and working at the household level, is what are we doing to engage people's productive capacity so that they are not just consumers, that they're not just they're not just there for the benefit of a few people who are financially benefiting from that consumption at any cost. Well, you're the cost, you know?
I did want to get back to because we are writing an anti-fragile playbook. Actually,
that's what I was just about to ask you about.
I would say we've written a lot of it. Actually, Trudy's the editor.
Yeah, Trudy's doing,
and
like
and because and so there's a basis of it. So I had done playbooks before. I was in a combat communication squadron. I was a staff sergeant. We could expect to lose everybody 3 times in order to pull our job off. And what it meant is that we would receive replacements, but you know, I mean, we're talking the military here, which in my charitable opinion is a social welfare system with firearms. Okay, so we're not talking about people that sit and read manuals, especially when they got dropped into something. So I actually literally created a playbook that got adopted through the Air Force. I got pretty good recognition for that, and that was in the 80s. Because it allowed us with our operational continuity in the context of high attrition, which I used immediately in the context of political advocacy. Like, you know, if you're having a political campaign, you can expect to have 1,000 volunteers and about 30 to 40% attrition over the course of 6 months. So you have to maintain continuity. And so that went towards the realization that you've got to create something like a playbook, emphasis on play, because people don't remember. They're not going to sit and read. I like to say you heal by healing, you learn by teaching, and you remember because things are funny. So you got to do those things. So fast forward a few years, I was executive director for a nonprofit that did skateboard advocacy. And what we wanted to do was how to activate that potential within the communities. And so I had called around and said, who was responsible for that project? You know, the changing of a master plan that resulted in a skateboard park and a basketball court, et cetera. They would give me the number of usually a mom right? To reference Ruth's thing about women's work. Again, not always women, sometimes men who had lost their son or they lost their daughter, and that gave them a sense of purpose. And they spent years advocating for a change in their community. And they always had a binder. There's something about them. Trudy's one of those people. She has a whole thing of binders. She's one of those binder people. So I said, would you send me
Not
your...
like Mitt Romney. A
Yeah,
little different.
not binders of women, but I mean, you know,
Women's binders. See,
women's
it's not
binders.
flipping the
It is
script.
script.
That's right.
Tomato, right? Anyway, so they'd send me their binders. I was working at Xerox at the time, so I went to the war room. You dig this, Maggie? And I took these things apart, put them on the wall, and I found that because I'm Lean Six Sigma certified, I know how about process controls, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. These things follow the same step every single time. So we compiled that into, this is actually the first printing of it. We went through 2 hard printings, and then it's available online for free. It's called the Public Skatepark Development Guide. And so it was paid for, the printing was paid for by the Tony Hawk Foundation, which is the professional skateboarder, the International Association of Skateboard Companies, the skateboard industry, and then, you know, my organization, Skaters for Public Skate Parks. About 120 pages, and it has 5 major sections. But right in the middle is actually the page 1. Everybody goes to fundraising first because they think money solves problems. They're wrong, by the way. Money creates new problems. So what this chapter did is charitably told them that if they don't actually go back to the beginning, they're not going to get any money. And if they do, it's chaos, right? And so that book was made available. It went into Masters of Urban Planning programs. It was adopted by city people. It actually was adopted by the activists themselves. So it used to take 5 to 7 years to get a skate park. That went down to 18 to 36 months. And that's what landed me a seat on the board of the Tony Hawk Foundation, which was a fascinating experience, right? So here we are, we're almost like 20 years later, and we want to replicate that. So when Ruth, you know, was like, hey, we should do, I'd like to say, this is Ruth, yo, we should do an Anti-Fragile Playbook, which is not true, by the way, but you know, in the movie, I get to do the Ruth voiceovers. She's like, she said we should do the
We have
Anti-Fragile.
to have like Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of.
Yeah. We'll be
Anti-Fragile Playbook, yo. So I was like, I know how to do this, right? So, but having been through this experience, I want to do it differently. One of them is that I want to actually use it on ourselves. That's one of the things that I really wanted to do, because you want to be able to show that you've done it, right? So we're actually doing it here on our own community.
In your neighborhood
in Windsor Park.
Yeah, the Windsor Park. So it's actually about a 4th to a 5th of the livable area within a zip code in East Austin. So, and it's in our neighborhood. If I walk about 20 minutes that way, I saunter, as I say. I said, Ruth, I'm sauntering your way. It's about 20 minutes to saunter to her house at the southern margin of that. And then over there is the other one. There's about 5,000 homes. And the idea is that how can we launch and sustain an economic revival using money that remains under the table, normally stays under the table, and by activating local leadership. I mean, that's the thing we're working on, and it's not limited to hard capital. How can we bring forward forms of soft capital that might transcend the value of hard capital, but using the lens of anti-fragility, so it would thrive under difficult circumstances? So that's my intro on the Anti-Fragile Playbook.
Yes.
I'm pausing right now.
Maggie?
Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah. Well, and actually, as we've kind of been able to dive into it, or been pushed over certain cliffs, as it were, and then through wings. What this is giving people a way to move their side hustle front and center.
Okay.
You know, so that what they're doing on the side that they actually really love doing, and they are looking at a future of 30 or 40 years they need to fill. And obviously the whole institution of corporate life is not going to support you in doing that. So we have a lot of, and Austin has a lot of maker people. And so they're very engaged. They're like, okay, great, I can actually do this. Well, what else has shown up is there's a client that's in development in Atlanta, and he has a passion for retirement products. He's an actuary, and he's like, okay, and he's focused on the Latino community because that's his personal community, but we were talking about it. He goes, well, once we get it set for the Latino community, I want every non-corporate community to be able to build their own retirement products. So that you could actually invest in the neighborhood. So you would have a neighborhood retirement fund, whatever it's going to be. And then another aspect of this is we have people that want to create a community engagement degree plan going from the associate's degree to postdoc, because this is in southeast of the United States, where they are actually, there's people coming from small towns going to private colleges. So they're very rooted in the town. So the idea is you go to the university to get the knowledge tools and you map it to the wisdom of the small town. So you're actually, so the town becomes a learning lab. So you're not losing that next generation, and it comes back and reinvests. So there's levels of this. And what we found, as soon as we had this framework called the Anti-Fragile Playbook that has a process attached to it, that people were getting real creative in what they're reaching out to us for. They have their lenses that they're looking through, but all of us have multiple lenses. So
you can use it, you can adapt it to whatever you're.
Absolutely.
And this is a playbook and an app. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so there's the playbook. The idea behind the playbook is that we would find, because this is the thing that was great about being with Dee and I ran a nonprofit, and we ran it almost entirely under gift economy, which is hard, but you can pull it off. And then I go to a nonprofit that's running a multi-million-dollar operation, and you learn a lot by that. One of them is that people who work in the nonprofit world don't have to live a state of abject poverty. You could pull up some really cool tricks, right? The Tony Hawk Foundation did this by doing individual contributions to the 501c3, which meant that they could spend it on payroll. Right. And so instead of, relying upon grants and then living a life of just abject poverty because you're giving back to the community, you could leverage some of these best practices. And so what we have is a playbook that helps them embrace the principles of anti-fragility. Okay. And the app basically provides the basis of doing that in a sustainable manner. So this is the thing that was cool. I learned along the way that these communities need like 7 features to pull this off. They because they are not always just in-person communities. They're typically virtual. Like it's really common to have a community like, in Portland, there's the Albina community. It's on the east side. And it used to be its own town, and it was a subject of redlining for a very long time. And then gentrification came along, and all those people were pushed to the entire area. So there's people who feel a deep multi-generational identity, people of color who feel a deep multi-generational identity with Albina, but none of them live in that area. So not none of them, but very few of them. So you could actually have that sort of that approach. So what we have, the first one is digital identity and identity verification. And the reason for that is, again, I come from the anti-fraud world, is that's the best thing you can do to minimize fraud. You have to show who you are, right? And the second one is communication. So one-on-one chat, group chat, social feeds. So you can say, hey, I'm going to have empanadas up at the Poco Loco up here till about 7 o'clock. Right. And so the third thing is a marketplace. It's built around a marketplace, and people can buy and sell. This is actually the heart of how this thing works. It necessitates transaction fees, but those fees are kept by our customers. So it creates the basis of a self-funded operation. And people don't realize how much money they pay in transaction fees.
It's
man, it's crazy. So if when times get hard, you want to talk about it through the lens of anti-fragility. Times get hard. They want to pick up a side hustle. So they start selling things on Amazon Marketplace. That's 15% per transaction. You're paying Bezos, right? So we recommend that communities charge 5%. It's up to you. It doesn't matter to us, right? But then the community keeps those fees, and they do so. It actually adds up. It becomes actually quite lucrative.
That could be the retirement fund. It could
be,
and
so
healthcare.
Emergency slush fund for the community.
That adds up in a hurry, actually. You'd be surprised. And so then the fourth function is banking. And that's been a pretty interesting discussion all by itself. The fifth one is reputation, so people can build a social clout. The sixth feature is arbitration for conflict resolution. And in our case, we would actually recommend that somebody in the community with a lot of wisdom and trust would be used for arbitration, which is typically an older person. And in that case, they can actually make use of what that hard-earned wisdom, right? They end up being not discarded, but a person with great honor within the community. And the final one is governance, which is, roles and responsibilities, access and permissions, policies and procedures. What I basically delivered is the basis of a franchise, right? If you want to think of it that way. And there's additional things. We won't let the communities grow beyond about 1,000 people, because that's part of this addiction to high octane capital. People think, oh, it'll be great. And what you end up doing is throwing people away. But if we force them to root deeper, you actually unlock greater value. They can always create another community, but just cap it at that. But even then with 1,000 people, if there's 100 sellers and 900 buyers, we have basically 3 eras within 12 months. The first one is buy local first. And at the end of that buy local first program, we estimate that the people that are participating as sellers, they're end up bringing in about $400 extra a month, which is not huge, but that might keep them in their house, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's the thing that we have to do. And so the other thing is that the self-governing committee, the committee that's actually doing this on behalf of the community, that's generating $2,000 a month in transaction-based revenue, which is decent, man. That's a decent thing. So we would recommend that they turn that into an earn and learn program that goes into the second era, which is helping people become producers. And in our case, we would recommend the Texas Cottage Food Law. So people would run a cottage-based business that allows them to actually run a home
To get started.
food business.
Micro entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then in this case, we could use a commercial kitchen from a local church to actually help them scale up. And Maggie, you probably recognize that's Ruth tapping into her experience from Community Renaissance Market. And then the third one is getting people to source their inventory from within the community. And so in this case, we're actually demonstrating regenerative best practices, the anti-fragile model, that kind of thing. And you'd be amazed at the end of that 12-month period, that same community of 1,000, we think could be generating almost $10,000 a month in transaction-based revenue for programs. So, and that's pretty decent. From there, they could say, well, we could do a basic income for the community. We could maybe put together some healthcare options. So they could self-fund social programs. And that's only after 12 months. And all of that's paid for by just focusing locally instead of continuing to participate as consumers within an extractive economic solution. So
It seems like the funds you're talking about might be useful for providing micro loans in the community.
Yes, absolutely.
That's actually the thing that I learned almost immediately working with those populations when I was with BitNation, is that they don't need a $50,000 loan. They need to borrow $80 until payday.
They need to get a battery for their car.
And their only collateral they have is their reputation, right? So, and so that was the thing is that we have to be able to make that available. So, there's an app that's associated with it, and there's the playbook. So,
and how soon are you ready for launch soon, or are you still?
Well, we're doing it in this neighborhood as a pilot, and of course we're happy to talk to any community, because I would say, I mean, technically we've already launched. It's pretty cool too, because people said, wow, that's really cool and very unicorn-like and idealistic until COVID and everything else, and suddenly we're the only ones that thought to put together a self-funded economic thing.
Oddly, going back to what you were saying, you're the ones being the realists, right? To me, it sounds like the practical that I've been like, why aren't we doing this? All my life, like, why is this so hard? Why does everything have to scale up? Why does everything have to you talk about the 4 questions. My version of that is like, why do we do it this way? What committee set this up? Like, why do we have to wear suits and ties at work? Is there some committee that, like what? Anyway, so tell us the 4 questions. I love the 4 questions.
The 4 questions are, is it true? Has it ever been true? Could it be true? And should it be true?
Mm-hmm.
And so you go from the very binary, either it's true or it's not, all the way up to the ethics of should it be true. And it's just been my feeling. I mean, I do a lot of intuitive leaps into everything, and I noticed that everybody's kind of born into a question. And so the generation that was born after 9/11, they were born directly into should it be true, because there was no evidence that any of those old those old stories were ever true. They're like, no, owning a house is not helpful. Right. Going to college in the traditional way, no, that's not helpful either. Right. None of those stories actually hold up, because they're looking at their parents and looking at the struggle and saying, you're not, you're so engaged with making a living, you're not making a life.
Right.
And so that's what we're looking at, is that, are we really working to our own values? Or, as you said, Maggie, why do we have to care about this? And so it's, part of the core of this for us is balance. It's like, you can only sustainably rise as deeply as you root, and you have to balance transaction and transformation. And it's staying in that sweet spot in the middle and continually refreshing the screen and asking those 4 questions. Whenever you have a sense, if it feels wrong, go with it, start
Yeah.
questioning it. And because our goal here is not to stay in knowledge with answers, but to move to wisdom with better questions,
Right.
and kind of keep staying in that space.
I wanted to add something before we end, because I know we're getting close. John, the thing that I wanted to say, because you're right, you end up in circles with people that they say all the right things and they seem really smart. And I'm not saying that they're not, but in my experience, the people that change the world are the normal folks, like every time, right? And so that was the thing we learned with the skateboard advocacy. You'd think that I could tell a story of these great, super skilled skateboarders that were also amazing activists. That's sort of true, but what's mostly true are what I would call the accidental activists. They would end up being the moms almost always, and not always women, but they had that sort of what Ruth calls the women's work. They had acculturated themselves. They had been acculturated to be to take on that, basically keeping the hearth and home for the community. And for whatever reason, they decided they would step forward on behalf of their community and they would do those things. So that's actually our target. And for all the time I spent with ANCAPs, ANCOMs, anarchists, I mean, geez, man,
it's like, and so what?
For real, I can swim in all those waters, right? But the thing is that it's nothing more radical than this. It's Gandhi's village economics.
Yeah.
Well, this brings up a point about like those guys and people in general. Egos, the fact that everybody wants their answer to be the answer.
Right.
So I think part of the challenge of what you're talking about is how do you get people to come together and march in the same direction,
Right.
and how do you deal with the fact that there are going to be people who are going to want to march in a different direction.
Yeah.
And I mean, the organizing is the challenge, right?
Yep.
To organize something like this and to get everybody to buy into it in such a way that it's not just kind of a chaotic thing. Some of the things I see people talk, or some of these, like, I guess you could call them movements, something like Game B, for instance. They say, well, we encourage everybody to start projects for what we're going to do when Game A goes away and we start Game B. And people are running out in all different directions and starting their various projects, and they're very focused on their projects. They don't seem to be coming together and talking to each other about a real commonality of intention and purpose and execution. And I think that's, to me, the big challenge.
We had this interesting, it's allegorically connected. We'd spent a lot of years advocating for a skate park, the idea being that each town would have one skate park. And then we had a major breakthrough. We realized that's not what the skaters want at all. When you watch them, they're jumping down the stairs at the Target. That's a 1,500 square foot set of stairs that costs about $6,000 to make. So instead of, basically destroying 10 years of my life chasing a replication of a 70s era metaphor, what we should have done is build what we called skate dots and skate spots. So we're literally doing the same thing. I'm not trying to change the world, a world at a time. Let's change it just a community at a time, starting with my house and Ruth's house. Like literally it starts at the kitchen. And by activating those people who are actually the de facto leaders in the community. Ruth said something great. I'm paraphrasing it. She always says something great, by the way. But it's like the centralized entities, like us down here in the streets, that's the last mile. And how do you put it? Because I love how you put it.
Well, the institutions and the top down is always, they say we can't afford to do the last mile. It's like, we'll get you this far, but then you're on your own. But for us, we're looking up at it. It's like, well, that's our first mile. This is what matters to us. This is the key.
This is our first mile. It's easier for us to do than it is for them, right?
So
No, go ahead, Ruth.
I was just going to say, so what it is, it's not about getting everybody to go in formation towards this story. It's doing what Bucky has instructed us to do, which is to build a different system. Is don't waste any of your resources or your energy trying to convince anybody of anything, because has it ever worked for you? That's all I'm going to ask, right?
And also, it doesn't qualify as communism, capitalism, socialism, or whatever other ism, because we're talking 1,000 people. It's like, it's not any more ism than a church, right? I mean, come on, right? So you can wear whatever color shirt you want. We're talking about the neighborhood here.
It has a definite rooted, grounded feeling, bottom up, not top down. And the thing I've been telling everybody, with a few minor things, I've just trying to meet with people, right? Like, people are like, well, I can't meet on Sundays because it's like, look, we're just going to hold the window open. Show up if you want. and don't if you don't, right? But what's happening is the conversation is starting to slowly scale, like you're saying. You just start, you just do something. Just start between a couple of people, right? And also, you know, that I really appreciate that, you know, the change at the kitchen table, because you know, as I was whinging to you, Ruth, you know, if I read one more post from a thought leader lounging in Tulum during COVID, coming up with all their solutions, you know, and talking about how cheap it is to live there. Like, wait, you want to change the world, but you're extracting from the people whose community you're living in? Just shut up. I'm done. So anyway, I just wanted to.
Seems like a good stopping point. Just shut up. Awesome.
This is
You
great.
and Lindsey Graham are both done.
Yeah. We're just,
Yeah.
well, we sure appreciate you. This has been a great, lively conversation. I suspect we'll have more.
This is so fun.
Oh yeah, Anti-Fragile Playbook was it .com or org?
Playbook.com, right?
I made the website. Oops.
We'll also put your links up. We'll also put your links up. So
Nice
And
meeting
we'll be
y'all.
putting this on our regular podcast as well. So we,
Okay.
we believe in reuse.
It's
Good.
good. It's good meeting Joni Mitchell, Susie. That was
Yes,
nice.
I was just gonna
She's a good girl. She's a very good girl.
She sounds like a big girl.
She sounds like it, but she's not.
Oh, okay.
This is the amplification she
All right.
has.
All right.
all right.
Super fun.
It was
Thank
great to meet y'all.
Yeah, you
Take
too.
care, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.